a member of the House Armed Services and Homeland Security Committees, Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have any concerns at all about the president's summit and outcome with Kim Jong-un?
Well, I think to the extent that we find ourselves in a protracted negotiation, that redounds to North Korea and China's advantage, because almost by definition it means that we're letting up on the maximum pressure campaign. And in the press conference after the summit, the president seemed to admit that China is breaking sanctions. So if indeed that's the case, I think we should be in the business of applying more pressure. We should be sending letters of inquiry to Chinese banks and businesses that may be engaged in money laundering and supporting the North Korean regime. I also have concerns that we didn't see the words complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement in the agreement. But listen, I think there's a lot of time for Secretary Pompeo to come to the Hill. This is obviously the start of a longer process here. I give the administration a lot of credit for creating the opportunity, and I think we all want to see this process and this crisis resolved peacefully and diplomatically. And we in Congress should be working with the White House, by the way, on a bipartisan basis, to make sure that our diplomacy has the best chance possible to succeed.
I appreciate your honesty. I see that you are a skeptic on the concessions to the Kim regime, and I wonder, does that concern you at all? Are you afraid that President Trump will be mad at you? Because many Republicans appear to be afraid to speak a little bit more candidly about some of the concerns they may have.
Well, listen, I want the president to succeed, and I've seen in the past 8 years, well, really, I think since the 70s, which I'm told were an interesting decade, Congress has surrendered a lot of its authority on national security to the executive branch, and I think that distorts some fundamentals of our Constitution. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for Congress to be an equal partner in this process, and I actually think it enhances the White House's leverage. When they sit across, there's well-established political science literature on the nature of two-level games. In other words, when the White House sits across the table from the North Korean counterparts, they can point to Congress and say, hey, we got these crazy men and women in Congress that have to approve any agreement that we get, and that's why we're insisting on such a harsh agreement. So I actually think if you want to see this resolved diplomatically, Congress should insist on a place at the table. And that, by the way, that's also the best way for any deal they get to survive this presidency. As we saw with the Iran deal, it did not outlast the Obama administration.
So, Dr. Sachs, the president said yesterday North Korea, quote, is no longer a nuclear threat. Of course, that's not true one day after the summit. He's obviously talked about stopping or at least suspending military exercises along the border. He even floated yesterday in an interview the idea of getting American troops off the Korean peninsula, saying it costs too much. What's your view, if anything, of what moved the ball forward at that summit? Are we any closer to the denuclearization with North Korea than we were a week ago?
To be honest, I think we just don't know.
Sorry,
I mean, we throw this word denuclearization around, and it's clear that Kim is speaking an entirely different language when he says that word. I mean, when they say denuclearization, and by the way, this is being filtered through a South Korean press that very much wants a deal, oftentimes they're talking about suspension of further advancements of their program, where we're really talking about dismantlement. So I think there's a lot of work left to be done. I think it was neither the historic victory that one side is claiming, nor the historic concession that the other side is claiming. It's sort of bizarre to me that all this is being analyzed through the filter of tribal partisan politics. I think we should all try and take a step back and just figure out what's actually going on here.
All right, Jeffrey Sachs, jump in.
Well, I agree with
And Congressman Mike Gallagher, thank you very much for being on.
Thanks, Congressman.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree with